Overtired. So tired. Overtired.
You're listening to Overtired. I'm Christina Warren, and I am joined, as always, by Brett Terpstra. I was going to say Brett Severance Gunzel, which would be funny. No, I'm
Big
joined,
news!
Big news! Your two favorite podcast hosts got married. No, by Jeff Severance Gunzel and Brett Terpstra. How are you guys doing?
Tired, but good.
I tore my meniscus at a bookstore.
What bookstore? Was it like was it a bookstore with a jungle gym?
No, every bookstore I realize is ableist because you can't get down to that bottom shelf if you're
That's
you know
true.
if you have any trouble like squatting or bending over or eye problems, whatever. So I was at Drury Lane Books in Grand Marais, Minnesota, which is right on Lake Superior. It's an amazing, tiny, independent bookstore, and it is a great example of how good curation can make a small bookstore feel big. And I like to go there. We go there every spring break to Grand Marais, and I like to go to that bookstore and look at every book, just scan every shelf. And I was squatting down to scan the bottom shelf, and something July 4th like happened in my left knee, and I tipped over.
Oh no.
And then a couple days later when I'm home, it swelled up super bad. And I went to, by the way, orthopedic urgent care, right?
Okay.
That's a thing.
Oh, that's
And-
nice. I didn't
And
either.
that is amazing. And if you go to the rich suburbs, nobody's there. And so you get right in. So anyway, how am I doing? I'm actually doing good, but my knee hurts, and I it's been pointed out that it's the nerdiest thing ever to tear it at a bookstore.
For the show notes, what was the name of that bookstore?
Drury Lane, Drury.
Like the Muffin Man.
Like the Muffin Man. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I figure I love independent bookstores, so we'll put them in the show notes. Maybe someone will be like, "Hey, I want to go to the place where Jeff tore his meniscus."
Yeah.
Have you guys ever been to Literati in Chicago?
God, I lived in Chicago, but no. How long has it been around?
I have no idea. A while, but I don't know. At least 5 years, maybe 20 for all I know. But great bookstore. So, quick note from the editor. The bookstore I'm talking about here is actually in Ann Arbor, and I visited on the same trip as I went to Chicago, and I mixed up my locations. But the reason Jeff had never heard of it is because it's in Michigan.
No,
Great bookstore.
the ones that I know, and I know Seattle has some, but I'm going to be honest with you, Seattle's a city kind of sucks. And
Portland has
Powell's.
great
Well,
bookstores.
they have Powell's.
I was going to say Portland has Powell's, and then in New York it's the Strand, and that's just like the best.
Yeah, I was just getting into this with someone like Powell's is Strand, but better somehow.
Yeah, agreed. But it's one of those things like the Strand was like not far from where I worked, so I might have told the
amazing.
I might have told the story before, but I had this. It was like the greatest day ever. Where, and it didn't start out that way. I think this is actually a good segue to Mental Health Corner. I got off the subway. It was like 8:45 in the morning, which for me was early because I never got to work like in time for the 9 a.m. meeting. That was just sort of a known thing that I was going to either be on the call or I'd be coming in late because like I just was not a morning person. So unless I was on TV at like 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or something, I was not in the office early. Get off the subway, and I just like had this overwhelming sense of dread. And I was like, I can't do it today. I can't do it. I can't go in. I can't do it. And so I made up an excuse because back then, this was like 7 years ago, like you couldn't say, oh, I need a mental health day. So I make up an excuse. I was like, oh, I just threw up or something or another. I was like, I've got to go back home. But instead of going back home, I was like, I don't really want to go back home. I know I can't do anything else. Like I can't do work today, but I don't know what else I could do. So I went to the Strand and I walked around, and like as soon as it opened, like I had to wait like a couple minutes, and I just walked around there for a while. I wound up buying a couple of books, and then I found like a 10 a.m. showing of Spotlight. Like, because that was in theaters then.
Yeah.
At the Regal in Union Square.
Is that the one about the Boston Globe's coverage of the sex scandals in the church? Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
And it's just a fantastic journalism movie. It's just a great movie all around. So I see that movie at like 10 a.m. in a fairly empty theater. And keep in mind, I'm within blocks of my office. So at this point, I'm like, I got lunch, but I was like, you're gonna have to go home because somebody will see you. So then I like went to Prospect Park for the afternoon, and then I went home, and it was like the greatest day ever.
That's nice.
It
That's
was like
nice.
I played hooky, but it was like it was much needed, and then like I was able to come back to work like the next day and like actually be able to function. So
In my experience in New York, we lived there for like 3 or 4 years. Like those days where you're like, fuck it, I'm walking around. Like it's got that sort of Ferris Bueller's whimsy to it. You
totally.
know, it's such because you can go anywhere and you can do any kind of thing, and it's so great. Anyway, I love that.
Anyway, so that's my like bookstore slash mental health treat yourself story.
You want to
Go
know?
to a bookstore, go to the movies, go to the park.
Yes, the most. Oh man. So I used to work in warehouses. It's pretty hard to feel bad about calling in sick to a warehouse. And I did one day, and it was a music distribution warehouse. It primarily distributed independent labels related to or adjacent to Ryko Disc, which had like Frank Zappa's whole catalog, and they had like Evidence, which had like Sun Ra's whole catalog. It was just an amazing warehouse, and we would get amazing visitors. Henry Rollins came once to talk to us when he started this really cool label with Rick Rubin called Infinite Zero back in like 96 or 7, and it was just meant to get stuff back into print that was most important to just the two of them. And Henry Rollins, for all the weirdness of that dude, came and addressed just the warehouse workers to tell us how much these albums and these CDs mean to him and how grateful he is that we're helping to get them out into the world. That is classy.
Yeah, it is.
and then and then the other thing that happened was I called in sick one day, and I learned at the end of the day that Bootsy fucking Collins had visited the warehouse.
Oh, you missed him.
Who was a hero of mine going back to when I was a kid. That was my first concert, was Parliament Funkadelic. Like, and I loved him so much, and I was so sad. And I have an autographed CD, thanks to my friend Joe, but it doesn't feel good. It just reminds me
that you weren't there.
I wasn't doing anything wrong. It was a shitty warehouse job. Like, I shouldn't have been punished like that. Bootsy Collins, I could have shook his hand. I could have just heard him, talking. Oy.
And then you never missed another day again after that.
Yeah, no, I got fired about 2 weeks later. I was the first strike was the president of the company came into the warehouse, and there was a vending machine right next to the door, and I was on the floor with my arm all the way up the vending machine trying to get a candy bar, and he just looks at me and he goes, "Get out of there." And then a couple weeks after that, I organized a pallet jack race where we would all just you could use them like scooters.
Yep.
And the corporate meeting offices look down over the warehouse, and at one point I see in that window like the entire administration leadership looking down on us, just like shaking their heads. And so anyway, eventually I got fired, which was the right thing for them to do. Anyhow, calling in sick days,
mental health
glad I
days.
don't have to do that anymore.
All right, so speaking of mental health days, should I start?
Yeah,
do it. I just want to point out that Brett is talking to us as his cat is in the foreground staring
me down.
and I'm like, I love your cat so much. Anyways, all right, go on.
What are we talking about, Brett?
Okay, so the first update I have is a week of microdosing mushrooms. I wrote a blog post about this, and things were going really well, except Elle did not appreciate that I was so publicly putting illegal substance use out on the internet where it could be linked forever. And so I redacted the post, and I put up like hey, when things are decriminalized, I'll tell you more about this. But I think it's okay to talk about here. Maybe you won't put anything in the show notes, but I found the right dosage of the current strain of mushrooms I'm getting is about 200 milligrams a day. And at that dosage, there's no visuals. You don't feel like you're tripping at all. Like, that's not the point. But definite mood elevation, definite attention improvements. And I feel emotions, a wider range of emotions than I usually do. I
Huh.
get more excited and more empathetic, and it was going really well, and it wasn't causing any mania. But then I had this snafu where, so I went to the hospital back in December because my watch told me, right, that
Your
my
heart.
heart rate was elevated.
Yep.
And then the doctor last time I got a refill, for the first time, she's like, I can't give you a refill on Vyvanse until I hear from your doctor. And my doctor does not respond to messages or emails or calls even. The only way I've ever talked to him is to see him in person. So fortunately, I had a meeting, an appointment coming up soon. And I went to see him after I'd been off Vyvanse for about 3 days. And he said, there's no problem. Like, it was a fluke that you were in the hospital. There's no reason to stop your meds. And most cardiac events aren't exacerbated by stimulants anyway. So he said, sure, go ahead, continue the Vyvanse. I go back to my doctor, who, as I've mentioned before, is moving to another practice. And in between her denying my refill and me getting approval from the doctor, she had officially left the practice and discharged me as a patient and could no longer fill my prescription. And so the only option was to go back to my doctor and ask him to fill it until I can see her again. And like I said, he doesn't respond to anything. So I didn't have a lot of hope. I sent a message through the portal, and I made a phone call and talked to a sympathetic nurse. And a day later, he did come through, and I got my Vyvanse.
Good.
But when I'm off Vyvanse for a few days and I take it, boom, manic episode. So Thursday night, I didn't sleep at all. Released a whole new project. I love it. It's great. But
I am not caught up on that.
Yeah, I haven't written about it yet. You'll see it soon. But I slept last night pretty well. I think the manic episode was short-lived. I don't seem to be manic today, so it was like a one-day cyclothemia kind of event. So that's where I'm at now. Coming off a manic episode, have my Vyvanse back, learning more and more about microdosing and getting really good results from it. To summarize, in summary,
that's great. I was just talking to my cousin the other night about his experience microdosing, and it's super frustrating how far ahead of the laws this particular thing is. It's like really frustrating because it's technically Schedule 1. It's illegal to have, but everybody I know who has tried it, and it's 5-6 people, have only reported for them very positive effects.
Yeah.
And that's a small sample size.
I mean, the medical community, though, is very much interested in decriminalizing hallucinogenics so that they can continue what have proven to be very hopeful studies thus far. I think Washington that allows medical use of mushrooms?
I think so. I don't know the details, but that sounds right, because most things are...
I know there's at least one state that lifted the ban on mushrooms and maybe acid. Maybe it was Colorado. They were leaders in the weed decriminalization. So
yeah, I think it is. In
sense.
fact, I'm looking at a Colorado public radio story called "Stressed Out Busy Moms Say Microdosing Mushrooms Makes Life Easier and Brighter."
It does. It really does.
It's great. And I just want to read one of these sentences. Mommies who microdose are among the fastest growing groups of followers. And this, mommies who microdose. And also the photos in this are by my old colleague, Hart Van Denberg, who's a wonderful photographer and a wonderful man. I put it in the show notes.
Okay. All right. Here's where it's decriminalized. It is decriminalized. And this is according to the Wikipedia page, which is the status of psilocybin mushrooms. And then they have like possession, sale, transport, cultivation, and then the notes. And so the United States, just for possession, sorry, let me scroll down to where this is. I really do hate Wikipedia's the way they do the tables, honestly. In the future, I will use ChatGPT for this because I bet it would be in a prettier way. All right, it is illegal but decriminalized in Seattle, Washington, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Oakland and Santa Cruz, California, Somerville and Cambridge, Massachusetts, Oregon, so the whole state of Oregon, and Washington, D.C., and it's legal in Colorado.
All right.
Okay.
So it's decriminalized in Seattle. But it's interesting that it's just Seattle. So I'm like, okay, is it just the city of Seattle? Is it like the other? Probably is just the city. And it's decriminalized in Ann Arbor. Because you gotta like let the rich like hoity-toity folks have access, but also I mean honestly it makes sense I guess from like a medical school hospital.
It's a big college town with a big medical program. So.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So that makes sense. Oakland and Santa Cruz I can see. Oakland feels a little okay, because it's not like there are good hospitals in Oakland. There are good hospitals in Palo Alto. There are good hospitals in San Francisco. I don't know if there are good hospitals in Oakland.
There's got to be good hospitals in Oakland.
I don't think so, but I will let our
you, Oakland.
I will let listeners correct me what I'm sure is wrong. Somerville and Cambridge, so Cambridge makes sense. Decriminalize all of Oregon and Washington D.C., but then Colorado is just like fucking legal, dude. We don't care.
It's so weird that it's by and large so like city by city. Like, is it just that hard to get state legislation passed that the cities were like, we'll just within our borders, you're fine.
Probably, and I don't know. Like in Washington State, I feel like it's something they could probably get passed, but I don't know. But I also know the Seattle City Council, who's I hate, and I think that they're completely like incompetent, and I'm so glad that the piece of shit city councilwoman is not running again. Sorry to people who are fans of Kashama Sawan, but she fucking sucks. But
Christina's coming after everybody.
I am,
Oakland, the city council.
It's mostly just Seattle. I've just been pissed off at Seattle for the last couple of weeks, to be totally honest with you.
Okay.
But my city councilwoman she fucking sucks. She's the fucking worst person in the world. She's like she's the person who makes all socialists like look bad. Because she's such like a she's so left. She's like it goes into just like it goes into parody status and literally like makes everything that we fight for like harder because of assholes like her. But yeah, I can see it having no problem getting passed in Seattle City Council. I would think they could do it statewide though. Maybe it just takes more time. I don't know.
Minnesota still hasn't legalized weed, but we can have edibles.
We're close.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much, I mean, we have a completely democratic government at this point, and so it's one of those things that's just going to kind of slide right through.
I just don't
I read this deranged National Review article this week from some like I felt very sad for the family, but that was just like, wow, you guys are completely taking this out of like blaming the wrong thing, who are going on this anti like legalization of marijuana scheme because their schizophrenic daughter who overdosed. It's very sad. They blame her schizophrenia on the fact that she like smoked weed in college. And it's
weird.
Like,
is that legit?
That's not what they mean when they say gateway.
Yeah, that is like, legit.
I'm told that my drug use may have caused my bipolar. There are other members on my mom's side of the family that had bipolar, all of which are dead now. But I was told by both my therapist and my psychiatrist that drug use in a young brain can lead to complications such as bipolar disorder.
I think, and I don't know because I'm not a doctor, but the studies and the things I've read are that if you have something that's latent that's already there, it's possible that drug use at a young age, and it depends on the drug. And marijuana, I think that there's some there's some confusion about this. I think it would have to be a lot, and I think that it would have to be a very specific circumstance. Could be the thing that could like maybe quote unquote like set someone off, like unlock what's already there. But I think that it's like a massive reach to be like this caused it, because as you said, like you've got other members in your family. You don't know whether they did, drugs or not, but it could also even come down to like, well, this could be, medications that you're on, could do things too. I think there's some people who might be, you could make an argument, are predisposed to developing certain conditions, and maybe like drug use speeds it up.
I mean,
But
I had bipolar symptoms in high school, and I didn't really get into. I was drinking in high school, but I didn't really get into like any massive drug use until I was like 16. So my first couple years of high school, I was definitely displaying symptoms of mania and depression before drug
before,
use.
there's also, I think, an argument to be made that people who are, potentially having symptoms might be seeking out drugs
Yeah.
to self-medicate.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. See, that's the thing is when I think about like my heroin addiction, it very much like I sought it out because of my mental kind of imbalances, my needs, like the need for dopamine and the need for a kick and the need for a way to numb my feelings. Like it was all very much like my mental health led to that kind of addiction.
Right.
I don't think normal happy people seek out heroin.
Right. No, I don't think like, yeah, I mean, I don't know who does. I mean, like, I think maybe you're bored, maybe, you don't know whatnot, like, because I've certainly done certain drugs when like had nothing to do with like the state of my mental health. You're just like, okay, fuck it.
I wanted to do something dangerous. I get a real kick out of throwing caution to the wind, and I couldn't think of anything more dangerous than doing hard drugs. And
no, fair enough.
like it was real exciting. It still is. The thought of like doing drugs is very much appealing to me. Like all of my bad experiences combined don't make it any less appealing.
Is it that that you could die? Is it the risk factor? Like,
no,
or is it the taboo and it being illegal and dangerous?
It's the taboo and just knowing that it's going to feel really good and I can forget about everything else for a little while. Not just problems, but forget about everything else and just focus on the drug.
Yeah.
Did you watch Fear the Walking Dead?
I did. I watched like the first few years.
Yeah.
There was this character Nick, played by Frank Delane, who's just amazing in this role.
Yeah, he's the junkie, right?
He's the junkie, and I was just curious if you had seen it. Like, there are all kinds of stages of his experience that get represented, and I think he does a really powerful job of representing them. But there is this moment where he's been almost like willing to be reckless when things are getting dangerous around his family, and there's a point where I believe he has to sort of make a decision, and his family's urging him not to, and he makes this point of like, I've been close to death so many times, like I've died. He's like, I'm ready. But he talked about sort of how he kind of hit at that thing about the risk of it, which is something that like I don't think people often understand about heroin addiction or heroin use, is that sense of like walking up to the ultimate line, potentially, and not knowing how you're going to come out of it.
Yeah.
Is that I mean, does that resonate, or is that kind of a fair reflection of what you just said? To
some extent, I've never, like, I started thinking about my mortality at a very young age, and I think I just kind of accepted that I'm going to die one way or another. And it wasn't necessarily a thrill to like seek out death, but it didn't scare me. So I don't think that was a reason I did it. I don't think that was where the thrill came from. But a side note, ADHD people, it's been theorized that we exist because in an evolutionary capacity, ADHD people are the ones that notice when things are wrong fastest, and in pressure situations, we're the ones that take control. We're the ones that are like suddenly come into our own.
Yep.
We're like, no, I got this, and we're willing to take risks. We're willing to do dumb things to like save the day. And like for like early man and even early even post AD man, like that kind of characteristic needed to exist within a community. It's less so now. Now it's more of a detriment. But like in especially like hunter-gatherer society, it makes a lot of sense. You would want the ADHD kids around.
You would want the person with the low impulse control. It's so interesting because my ADHD, like, I don't have like lack of impulse control. Like that's not one of my that's like not one of my symptoms. Which is interesting. I don't think that I'm not trying to like make this across gendered lines because I just don't know enough. But I do wonder if, because there is whether it is genetic or if it's like a sociological thing, you see the difference a lot of times. Like, and I know this from my mom. Like you can observe very clearly little boys who have ADHD in the classroom. Like it's very, very obvious.
Yeah.
Little girls, it's not as, usually because they don't have the same lack of impulse control. And I don't know like what the reason for that is. I don't know, again, if it's like a genetic thing, like a chromosomal thing, or if it's just like a conditioning thing.
Yeah,
like,
it definitely presents differently in females and
100%. Like because the thing is that I definitely was a lot more, and I wouldn't say I had impulse control. I was just more like, I don't give a fuck. Like before I entered elementary school, I was definitely like, my personality was definitely much more like outgoing, and like they called me the wild woman, and I would like do some things that you might strike you as impulsy things, but then I don't even know how to like grip that, because I'm like, okay, if you're 2 years old, like what does that mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I didn't have any of the symptoms when I was in elementary school. Like people never would have thought that I was ADHD, but then looking back at it, and I'm like, oh no, I had those things. It's just I was able to cope with it very well, and it was hidden. And so I didn't get diagnosed until I was like 15.
Same with autism too. Like girls at a young age become better at masking symptoms than boys do.
Totally. Although I think like for my ADHD, it wasn't even a masking thing per se. I mean, like there was some masking. I would mask my depression, but like I didn't feel like I was masking. Like I remember when I got diagnosed, I was like, this is insane. And it was one of those things that I even like blamed. It's funny, kind of going back to the topic, like I'd been on Prozac, and Prozac is the thing that seemed to kick off like the most overt ADHD symptoms I'd ever had, where I was no longer able to control. If they'd been there before, like I would maybe put things off, and I would maybe, kind of get into scenarios where I would have to, kind of crunch, but I was always able to do it, and it was never a problem. And then Prozac, I was like literally unable to focus on anything. And I've never felt more like stereotypically ADHD in my life than like when I was on that drug. And then even going off of it, it didn't stop. And so there was, like causation is not, these things are not correlation, whatever, correlation is not causation, whatever the phrase is. But there was like an instinct where you want to say, oh, this happened because of this. But like, I don't think that would be an appropriate thing for me to be like, oh, I went on this antidepressant and that's what caused my ADHD. Like, because I can go back and I can look at, oh no, I had these other latent things. Now, did it exacerbate a thing that was already in my mind and maybe have it present itself earlier and more acutely than it would have otherwise? Sure. But like, I wouldn't say that we need to ban Prozac the same way,
right.
Like again, like as awful as I feel for the individual family whose, daughter like went from being seemingly perfect to having schizophrenia and then dying. It's like, she was schizophrenic. She wasn't going to be okay if she'd never smoked pot,
Yeah. That's really interesting. That Prozac connection though.
Yeah.
That's not a side effect I've ever heard about.
No, and it's not one that anybody else has ever seen, but it was so acute. It was literally like an overnight thing. Like it was literally a like you're taking this drug and a complete important component of your personality completely changes.
Doesn't Prozac have like a 1 month titration period? Like I'd be curious, like what chemical reaction happened? Because like for depression, you don't even see depression symptoms get better for, I think it's a month.
Oh, it depends. And I'm very sensitive to medication, especially in SSRIs, which is why I can't take traditional SSRIs. And we found this out because I went on like 15 or 16 different ones in a small period of time.
I know how that goes. Off. Yeah.
And there's another component there, which is my age was one thing, but my body weight and my bone age was another. And this was before a lot of doctors had experience prescribing these sorts of things essentially to children. Because when I was 15, my bone age was 8.5 and I weighed like 68 pounds.
Hmm.
So,
Bone age.
yeah, like so they'll scan your wrists and stuff, and they'll like compare like the size and like the density and things of your bones to,
Oh
and
yeah, bone
they'll
density is
yeah,
part of it. Okay,
and
got it.
they'll age it that way. And I was so small and like hadn't gone through, puberty and all those things, that it was one of those things that like having, they were having to look up on their, charts and things. Okay, well, how do we even dose this? How do we even prescribe this? Because the normal dose would be this. How do we dose this to someone, you know, this size? And so, which was a challenge. So, I don't know, like it could have been but it was one of those things where it was within days. It was definitely within a week where I noticed on Prozac, it was like an instantaneous, like, oh, I can't focus. I can't pay any attention. I remember my mom sitting in the kitchen table with me, trying to run flashcards for me to learn my biology, like study for a biology test, and her just being almost like in shock because her straight A, like type A, like child, like couldn't focus on her face and couldn't remember one thing to the next and couldn't stop fidgeting and couldn't, have any amount of like recall.
Yeah. Wow. Huh.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
Or-
not to like, but bone density was something that we had a member of our family who was having just kind of had two weird stress fractures out of nowhere. And bone density is the kind of thing that you have to have the right doctor to even bring it up. I mean, we went to a couple of doctors, nothing came up. Then all of a sudden it was like, I think I called my cousin to talk to him about it. He's a podiatrist. And he's like, first thing he said, get the bone density checked. No one had done that. It's so interesting how there can be such a big thing that just gets missed.
Yeah. No, you're right. And that's something like I always have to like bring that up whenever I have any sort of, like break or whatever. Like I had to mention it when I was hit by the car and like I broke my wrist. Bring it up, I was like, so you should know, I had to go on certain things, and like my bone density, age, other stuff, I've less. Like I was basically told when I was a child, I was like, yeah, you're gonna have osteopenia, osteoporosis. Like it's not a will you, it is a when will you thing. Like
Yeah.
it's
Okay. Okay.
it's like, so I had to point that out. I was like, might look okay in this thing, but this is not the way it goes. Like even if you meet me in person, like you'll notice like my bones are still very small. Like
Yeah.
I'm a small person, but like my bones are like petite in a way that it's like, I appear smaller than I am.
So
Interesting.
you've been 29 for at least 5 years now. Do you
Yep.
think your bone age has
Oh,
caught up
good
with you
question.
yet?
Good question.
That is a good question. I don't know. I should get that. I should get that done. I don't know, because it's possible that it could go higher. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's possible. Like no, because it's possible that like
Oh.
that it could inverse. I don't know.
Or could you take your actual age, and if your bone age is younger, use that in a little bit of math to be able to really truly say, hey, I'm 29.
That is sort of like my like rationale for, remaining as young as possible, as long as possible.
Yeah.
Is the fact that actually, I've got like a 5.5, like 6 year like deficit between,
I'm 16 in bone years.
exactly. I'm 29 in bone
Awesome.
years.
That's great.
But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. That was my mental health update, but I didn't mean to interrupt you, Brett. But are you doing
no.
okay now?
Yeah. No, that was a very thorough mental health update for Brett, and Christina's kind of slid in and overlapped. So yeah, I'm good. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing good. What's been on my mind a lot lately, which is certainly a mental health connection, is chronic pain. And I just want to shout out to all my chronic pain people out there, who can only you can know how truly debilitating chronic pain is. It is very hard for the people in your life to hold that, right? Like to hold it constantly, in part because you're not always acting out of chronic pain, right? But the thing I've been thinking about is I've been making so many doctor appointments to deal with various kinds of chronic pain. I mean, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4". I'm like 270 thanks to Seroquel, medication that makes you gain a lot of weight. And I recently like gained weight so fast because of that medication that my joints were like, ho, not ready, didn't warm up for this. And anyway, the chronic pain thing that I just want to say, and I want to say to anybody out there for whom this might be useful, and I understand there are a lot of people with chronic pain for whom this won't be useful, but that I've had some good luck recently by just getting in to somebody who I trust to talk to. That's a hard thing to do, and I'm definitely leading into our ZocDoc sponsorship, but I have found some really key relief by finally just going in, which is a thing that's hard for me to do. In fact, when I went in with my torn meniscus, I've actually had some issues with that knee for about a month or two. And he said, "What have you done for it?" And I was like, "I'm a Scandinavian. I didn't do anything, man. I thought about surviving the next winter. Started gathering berries. That's what I did." Anyway, I mostly am saying that just to like send out like little empathy torpedoes to everybody out there who's experiencing chronic pain and is frustrated and paralyzed by it sometimes. ZocDoc.
I put together a new script for us, Christina. It'll be a cold read for you.
All right. This episode is brought to you by ZocDoc. All right. So you've been suing about a health problem you have. Maybe you've torn maybe you've torn your meniscus. Maybe you're concerned about like what is the bone age of your arm. Maybe you've got something else going on. You're almost resorting to texting your group chat to get your friends' opinions, which, you know what? Depends on your group chat. I'm going to be honest about you with you on that. Like, depends on the group chat. You're extremely unlikely to find quality medical advice in your group chat. But again, it's going to depend. But you can find it from a doctor on ZocDoc. Thousands of medical professionals on ZocDoc are there to help you, and they listen like a friend, and they give you expert care that you need. ZocDoc is the only free app that lets you find and book doctors who are patient-reviewed, take your insurance, are available when you need them, and treat almost every condition under the sun. So no more Dr. Roulette or scouring the internet for questionable reviews. With ZocDoc, you have a trusted guide to connect you to your favorite doctor you haven't even met yet. Millions of people use ZocDoc's free app to find and book a doctor in their neighborhood who is patient-reviewed and fits their needs and scheduled just right. I'm one of them. I've been using ZocDoc for more than a decade. It is my go-to place to find a doctor. So go to ZocDoc.com/overtired and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then find and book a top-rated doctor today. Many are available within 24 hours. That's ZocDoc.com/overtired. ZocDoc.com/overtired. ZocDoc.com/overtired.
/overtired.
We should have harmonized.
Overtired. I'll take the high part. No, I can't do that. So we are once again telling our listeners about the Tech Meme Ride Home as our promo swap. When the New Yorker magazine asked Mark Zuckerberg how he gets his news, he said the one source he definitely follows is Tech Meme. For 4 years now, the Tech Meme Ride Home podcast has been Silicon Valley's favorite tech news source. The podcast has become so successful, in fact, that it launched a venture fund where the listeners to the show are the LPs in the fund. The Tech Meme Ride Home is like TLDR as a service. It's not just the latest headlines from the world of tech, it's also the context around the latest news of the day. It's all the top stories, the top posts, and tweets and conversations about those stories, as well as behind-the-scenes analysis. Guests who have come on to lend their experience include Andreessen Horowitz's Chris Dixon and Bloomberg's Apple rumor king Mark Gurman. The folks at TechMeme are online all day reading everything so they can catch you up. So listen to the one podcast anyone in Silicon Valley listens to every single day. Search your podcast app now for Ride Home and subscribe to the TechMeme Ride Home podcast.
Boom. We are sponsored.
Should we talk about some Mac stuff?
Yes, let's please. We were starting to get into a really good bitch fest right before we recorded that I want to hear from both of you about. So yes,
I feel like that's a vital part of the Apple community is just complaining.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important.
If you don't complain, things don't get better, right?
That's exactly true.
I don't think my complaints help things get
Yeah,
better, but
same.
the two of you, I think, could make some motion.
I have successfully bitched on Twitter on a couple of occasions and gotten things fixed.
Yeah.
Like to be
for
clear,
individual teams, like I can see
Yes.
like the WebKit team listening to someone like you,
Yep.
or maybe even me, but Apple as a company,
oh
isn't
no,
listening.
absolutely not. No. But I'm just saying, like, yeah, if you can get things in front of the right people. And to be clear, like in like the most recent case, which was a tvOS instance, it was an issue that had been in a backlog, and then the hornet's nest that I kicked up that other people then added on to, then like made it prioritized. And I'm very thankful to the people who prioritized it so that I can access my Apple TV library on my Apple TV.
Yeah, that's handy.
It's useful, right? It's useful to be able to access the things you've purchased on the device that the company makes, when you can access it on all the other devices that are not made by that company in their app, but not on their latest and greatest device. Yeah.
Last night, we were sitting down to group watch Ted Lasso, and my girlfriend's sister.
I love this season.
So good.
It is really good. But my girlfriend's sister loaded up Apple TV on her Mac, the TV app, and it came up and basically said she had nothing in her library.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
this just happened to us. Yeah,
so
thanks.
We troubleshot it for a little while, and then I was like, "Have you tried turning it off and turning it back on?" And I rolled my eyes because, generic advice, but she rebooted her computer and everything was fine.
Yeah.
It worked.
Weird.
It always works.
So what's interesting on the Apple TV, if you are still running into problems, and they're clearly have issues, it's clearly an Apple problem, because they don't have this problem on other clients. Like it is on their own clients. Like if you're using the Apple TV app on a Fire Stick or on an LG WebOS TV or on
Wait, you can
a Roku,
do that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Because once they decided they actually wanted people to watch their originals, they realized that they couldn't rely on people to spend $200 on their, at the time, pretty shitty in comparison, like set-top box.
That's pretty obvious. Yeah.
Right. Like at this point, I think that the pricing is better and it's a decent experience, but I would still say I can get a Fire Stick 4K
for like $40.
Yeah, you can get for $25 a couple times a year, like $25, and I'm like, you can't convince me that this is 8 times better. It's because it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. So they realized, most people have smart TVs and Rokus and other stuff. So if we actually want people to watch our originals, we have to come out of our bubble and make iTunes for Windows. Which, that's a throwback to the iPod. The whole reason the iPod is a success is because it was available for Windows, period. If it had remained a Mac only thing, Apple as a company would not exist the same way that it does today. Anyway,
so you want
to be fair, I own a stick. I have an Amazon Smart TV. I have a Roku. I have 2 Rokus and 2 Apple TVs, and I would by far prefer always to use the Apple TV.
I don't disagree.
And partly the touchpad remote is a big part of that, and the interface that's really designed to work well with like touchpad thumb navigation.
Yeah, I agree.
It's perfect. It has its shortcomings for sure. I don't see things like the stick beating it out in a lot of the areas it sucks in.
No, I don't. I totally agree with you on that. I'm just saying, if you're trying to convince somebody to buy one of these things, for a lot of people, $200 is as much as a TV.
So it's better, but maybe not $125 better.
That's my point.
$25 better.
That's my point. It's better, but it's not 8 times better. Like if I can get one for $25 and one is $180.
Yeah, I see.
Like that's my argument. So they make the apps now for those things, and you can access. What's great about it, you can access all the original content, but what's better is you can also access your library content. And that to me was what was kind of the game changer. So I travel with, especially when I used to do international travel, I travel with a Fire TV stick. And I would like it because I was like, now I can watch my massive library of content that I've bought over the years through Apple
Yeah,
TV
it
sales.
is massive. I remember
Yeah,
you telling us.
yeah, it's like, it's massive, but it's not like that bad. It's like
It makes sense year over year, given the time you've been buying, right? The
totally,
period.
and also they have sales, and so but it's also one of those things. I'm like, honestly, like, because some people are like, well, maybe you just have too many things in your library, and that's why you can't access them. And I'm like, that's not an excuse.
Yeah, no.
Especially when I buy them from this company. But if you do run into that problem, you can use the iTunes Store apps on the Apple TV, where you can then have to go there to your purchases section, and it'll show you your purchases, and then you can play it that way if the TV app for some reason is not working on your Apple TV. But if you're using a Roku or a Fire Stick or whatever, it should work. And if it's not working on your Mac, as Elle was smart enough to know, just restart.
So Apple TV was not on our list of things to talk about, but
No.
I did want to mention on my last trip to Michigan, I packed our Apple TV and an HDMI cable, and
That's what I do.
I was really thankful for it when we got to the Airbnb, and they
Yep.
had a big screen TV mounted on the wall, and I could just plug in my Apple TV, and it felt like being at home.
Totally.
All of my logins were already set up for Hulu
Totally.
and Netflix.
Yep.
And
It's beautiful.
all of the Apple TV apps were available. I got my Plex server working. I could remotely access my friends and my home Synology Plex. And yeah, it was entertainment central.
No, if you're traveling in the US, I think that traveling with an Apple TV is fine. My one thing would be if you're going internationally, maybe not if you're wanting to use a VPN of any sort, or if you're at a hotel. This is the one thing. If you're on a normal, like, non-captive like Wi-Fi network, Apple TV traveling with it is great. If you're on a captive network, the Apple TV does not like that. And so getting that connected is a pain in the ass. That's why I like the Fire Stick. And actually, Fire Stick has now become a little bit, on some networks, complicated too. So Roku is ironically the best choice. So, which is my least favorite. But if you're going to be at a lot of hotels, take my advice and get a Roku or a Fire Stick, because the captive network support, that's what you want. Because otherwise you'll have to do try to create like a separate network connection between like your laptop and your Apple TV in the hotel, to like bypass the fact that you can't log in to their stupid like system.
Hotels have horrible what are they called? You just said it, the name
Captive.
for the networks. Captive.
Yeah,
I hate hotel Wi-Fi.
totally.
I have a Roku with a gyroscopic remote. Like you can use it almost like a Wii, and you can like move stuff around on the screen.
That's cool.
It's handy, but yeah, Roku's not great software.
I hated that feature on the Wii though.
I think the LG, it's not gyroscopic, but they have like a similar thing. Like some people love it, some people don't, where like you can kind of but it is sort of gyroscopic, I guess, where you can kind of move the remote to certain ways, and then it's got like this also, this little cursor thing that you can use. And I always have to try to like
accelerometer is what
that's what the word is. Accelerometer.
Yeah.
That's correct. I understand why it's useful. I also understand why my dad hates the LG remote and uses instead like the
it's the worst.
He uses like the Comcast like the Xfinity box to access all of his apps.
Also terrible.
And it's terrible and it's slow. And I'm like, use the one built into your very nice television, or use the Apple TV or the Fire Stick, because I bought you both. Use one of those. But that's, he doesn't quite get that. He prefers like the Comcast interface.
I hate those like the Wii control. I have a tremor, and so it's just a fucking.
Oh
nightmare.
yeah.
All right, let's talk.
We were going to talk about Stage Manager too.
I don't think we'll have to spend long on it.
No,
but let's.
Can I just say why I brought it up?
Yes, please.
I've stopped following the OS updates. I mean, I update, but I don't look for anything special anymore, because it's been a while since.
You don't read all the release notes?
I don't. I used to as of like 2 years ago even. But anyway, I was like, what's this Stage Manager thing? Like maybe this is cool. And I turned it on and I was like, immediately. Like I was like my grandma with the VCR remote. I was like, I fucking need a flashlight. And what are all these buttons? It was like how maybe you would have imagined a heads up display in 1975 is how it felt. And I got out of there so fast. I've never rejected something kind of native to the Mac so quickly, or to the OS. So anyway, that's why I brought it up. What the hell?
And my response was, like, I don't use it. I tried it as well. I don't think I understand. Like on a Mac, on a phone, it makes sense that I would want, one or two apps connected together, split screen on an iPad, and switch between like pairs of apps. Yep. But on my Mac, I use everything all at once. There's like never a time I don't want access to other applications windows. It's why I have two 32-inch displays.
Yeah, same.
And I don't like the idea that you can't easily access another running app because you have to switch stages.
That's what blew my mind. I was like, are you serious? Is there any way out of this? Help.
And I did, however, think it was better in execution than Spaces.
Yes.
Spaces, like, great idea, and like I was using whatever the X Windows version of Spaces was way back on Linux in high school.
Totally.
And it was cool to see it come to the Mac, but the fact is, like I said, I have two 32-inch displays, and I just have everything open and spread out, and the idea of like separating into different spaces just doesn't make sense for my brain. That's like, I minimize, like I'll hide all apps and just load up what I need. But I don't want to like flip between, especially once you get more than two. Like two spaces, sure. If you have a set of apps that are less accessed and all go together and belong on a space, great. But you have to flip through more than one space, and it's so confusing.
No, I totally agree. And then I'll forget like that I have an app open in a space. This is what my problem with Spaces would be. And it just doesn't work with my brain. I'm the same way as you. And like you, in high school, I really liked having separate virtual desktops. That's what it was called in Linux.
Yeah.
I really liked that idea. But for whatever reason, maybe it's the Mac implementation, maybe my brain and the way I use things is different. Maybe, I wasn't using multiple monitors when I was using Linux, that's for sure. And certainly not as big of screens as I have now. But now it's like, I forget that I have it open on a space. And so I'll open up another instance of an app, on like my main thing and then forget about it. And then accidentally it's like swipe over. It's like, oh, okay. But that's not where the tab that I wanted was, or that's not where the document that I wanted was. It's on this other thing, And so you wind up, at least for me, I wind up recreating spaces that are all identical to one another, but with all different things. So it was just like the worst case scenario. You're literally not benefiting from anything. Because like, I understand the point being like, oh, I have this set of tasks for this set of things.
Right. Context. If they neatly fit into different contexts.
Totally.
Sure. But I never have distinct contexts.
Same.
Like I'm always.
Well, and for me, like it would automatically, like if I would say, okay, if I had Spaces enabled a certain way, and if it's like, okay, I need to go into this web browser, if it automatically took me to that space.
Oh, okay. So I do have context, like podcasting is a context for me. And the only apps that I ever access while podcasting are Chrome, where we do our recording.
Yep.
Quip, where we have our show notes. And my browser.
Right.
And I could easily, and it would be cool to have a separate browser window with just tabs from the podcast. Yeah.
Arc does that, and I love it.
But I could just open up a new Firefox window in another space, and any tabs I created would be in that window.
Totally.
So that is a case where I could see, but I use Bunch for that. I use Bunch to literally like quit all my other apps, so I have all the bandwidth possible. And just switch into the podcasting context. But I could see that with Spaces. But speaking of Bunch, one of the requests I get very often is, how do I open a particular app on a specific space? Or can you interface with Stage Manager? And the answer to both is no. Like, Apple has never provided any kind of accessibility or automation workarounds for dealing with spaces, much like focus modes. Like, you can't, focus modes is even worse. Like, I should be able to, from an automation perspective, be able to access focus modes without using shortcuts.
Yep.
Like you can do some stuff with shortcuts, but yeah, it's annoying.
But Stage Manager, like in some ways, is even more egregious than Spaces to me, because Spaces is one of those things that I can kind of like turn off and kind of like, I forget that it even exists. I stopped activating it or whatever, and I don't like have to feel like I deal with it. Like you have to deal with it from a support issue, but like me as a human, like if I've
You can
forgotten,
just forget about it.
I've forgotten about it, unless I accidentally click like the plus, button when I'm doing expose. Is that the mode where you can see all your open windows? Because that I do love. Like I love expose.
Yeah.
But unless I accidentally click on like a plus, menu and add another desktop, and then when I'm swiping, I'm like, God, what did I do? I'm fine. But Stage Manager, it was like touted as like this new, like better Windows management thing, which in my opinion, like Mac OS desperately needs like a better like Windows manager. And it just does. But it was also touted as being this thing that would work really great on the iPad. And then on the iPad, it's even worse than it is on the Mac. And it was so bad on iPad OS that Federico Vici, Mac Stories, who's like Mr. iPad, like railed against it, and they didn't release it. Like they had to hold it back a while until it got better, but it's still not good. And I'm talking about somebody who has an M2, iPad Pro, like literally like the latest iPad Pro, and it's like the performance is not good, but then the utility, like I understand what they're trying to do, but to your point, Brett, like you're like, oh wait, so I can't do this very basic thing that I thought that I would be able to do, it's bad. It's really bad.
Did Vici write about this? Should I
Yes.
find something for the show notes?
Yeah, I'll find it.
Okay.
I'll find an ad. But yeah, why do you think though, like Windows, and I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to give like my former employer some credit here, like Windows 11 especially, but also with Power Toys, like they've now added really good tiling kind of Windows managed support like into the OS, like both into the the built-in stuff for the snap modes, but now with Power Toys you can go even further, and it is truly like a tiling window manager like for Linux or whatever, but at an OS level and very pretty. Like, and I know that we have third-party apps on Mac OS, but like, doesn't that just seem like this is like low-hanging fruit that Apple could just do to really improve things?
They could Sherlock Moom, which would be pretty amazing. But I really don't think if they build it into the OS, I don't think it'll be better than Moom. I love Moom to death.
So good.
And better touch tool for window snapping and like hot corners where you can like drag a window into a certain area and it will expand to fit, a quarter or a half of your screen. Like that kind of stuff. I have no problem using a third-party utility for. Yeah.
I don't have a problem with it. I wonder, like, if you clearly they recognize that window management is a problem for them to create something like Stage Manager, right?
Yeah.
And Spaces before that, like you clearly recognize that it's a problem. So if you're going to create Stage Manager, which is a mess, why would you not? I guess in my mind, I just don't understand the priorities where you see all of the third party things like Moom and whatnot, and you see that that's a direction that works and that makes sense, but then create this completely, in my opinion, just like over designed and under, like both over and under designed, like UI paradigm that you're not even going to have an API for. Like,
I will say, and I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but and I think it started a couple versions ago, but if you have two windows on your Mac desktop and you drag them near each other, the edges will stick. There's this fine, and you can, just drag a little bit farther and it'll go past it. But if you lightly drag two windows near each other, you can easily align them. That's a nice touch. It doesn't go anywhere near addressing your concerns, but little touches like that do impress me about the OS.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like that I really do like the fact that, like you said, you can get them so that they they touch or whatever, and I really do like that. But I just look at like, it's like you're so close, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and then you give a Stage Manager.
That's what I was thinking. What the fuck is this?
So your gratitude this week is Stage Manager then? Should we do a gratitude?
We should actually.
I will kick it off. Mine will probably not take long. I'm going with Microsoft Word this week.
Yes.
I'm just kidding.
I was gonna say that doesn't sound right.
That doesn't sound right. No, I'm gonna go with an app called Code Runner. I used to know the developer and I've forgotten who it's by. Hold on. Code Runner,
I used
about
to know the
Code
developer
Runner.
too.
Oh, Nikolai Krill. So this is a little app that basically gives you an REPL, a REPL, for a bunch of different languages, and it's got a nice editor with code completion and syntax highlighting and everything. And you can write your code for like Python or Objective-C or Swift or Ruby, and you can instantly run it and get console output as you work. And for hammering out an idea, like I love it for JavaScript stuff too, although VS Code and Sublime Text both have pretty good REPLs for JavaScript and accessing the Chrome console. But especially for like Python, which I'm not great at and need to test my work often in, the Code Runner is just a very well done tool that fits a very specific need.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been solid forever.
It has, and it improves more slowly these days, but it is solid. It has been solid, and it has improved over the years. I don't think it's on SetApp, is it?
It is actually.
It is, yeah.
Oh, there you go. SetApp
Even better.
Code Runner is on SetApp.
So yeah, so if you are a SetApp subscriber, which man, I love SetApp. That's just like my
So good.
completely unpaid, just like promoted, like that completely unpromoted, but just completely like genuine, like love.
I recently revised the script I wrote that you can run it and it will tell you what apps are on your system that are also on SetApp, so that you can choose to run the SetApp version and thereby give part of your SetApp subscription to the developers as a subscription fee, which only makes sense because SetApp versions are fully unlocked, and there's no if an app has a subscription model with a pro level, that's what you get on SetApp. You get the pro level. But I revamped it, or I revised it with some corrections that I got from users via Mastodon, and I had a couple of people contact me because they ran it and it told them like 20 of their apps were on SetApp. And they're like, well, why would I pay for SetApp if I already own all these apps? But I just want to clarify that this script is to tell you how you could take apps you own and give the developers more money. But there are a couple hundred apps on SetApps, and this script will not tell you all the apps that you could be using that you don't already own.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, can I say two things about Code Runner?
Please.
Yeah.
One is, as soon as you open it up, if you've never used it, go into, they say settings in the top, in the menu bar, but it's called preferences in the actual preference window. I don't know what that's about. But anyway, edit file type associations. It's on the first page at the bottom, and just make sure that everything is unchecked so that you don't start opening code files in Code Runner. I did, for the longest time, I didn't think to look at that, and I was like, I don't want this anymore. It's driving me crazy.
I kept forgetting, like I had not set YAML. So every time I opened a config file, Code Runner would pop up, and I rarely want Code Runner to be the default editor for any file type. Like I intentionally open Code Runner. So disable all of those file type associations.
Speaking of that, isn't there a Mac app that will tell you like what your default apps are, or that makes it easier to change those things?
It was originally called RC Default App. There's a new version rewritten in Swift, and it might be called Swift Default App. I would have to look it up. If I find it, it'll be in the show notes. But yes, RC Default App was awesome for doing some very system level adjustments to what file types are associated, what bundle IDs are associated, and even like protocols. Like if you want like a different handler for like mail to or FTP protocols, and you could set all that in there. And there is an updated version of it. I'll have to find it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I was going to say, I remember there being like a better version or a better like tool for that. and I couldn't remember what it was because
so it was a system preferences pane, or like a
right.
plugin. Does system set? Can you even have plugins in
Uh-uh.
the revamped Ventura system settings?
No.
Like all of those apps are going to have to come up with their own. Oh, that sucks. I fucking hate. That's what I want to bitch about with
I agree.
Mac OS right now. That system settings panel is
It's fucking
horrible.
terrible. And it's not like it was good before.
And they changed the name of it. So all of my keyboard
Right.
launching, like I'm used to typing SP. So I had to manually assign SP to open system settings instead of system preferences. I hate that.
No, I hate it so much. And then it's like, you have enough muscle. And like, look, to be clear, anything they changed it with, we would have had problems with because you get a certain amount of muscle memory.
Mhm.
And they would change the order of stuff even between OS versions, even when it had the same
Yeah.
overall interface. And that would annoy me because I was like, I don't
Well,
know, like,
so
what
system
I thought is
preferences, there's a setting in system preferences on previous versions to display alphabetically.
right.
And that would be the first thing I always set
Okay,
because
I never
stuff
used
does move around. And if it's displayed alphabetically and you get used to it, it's easy to find stuff. System settings, I could not use without the search.
No,
Like,
you have to use
it's
the
the
search.
only way to find what you're looking for.
No, you have to use the search.
It's good search. But
It's good search, but it's not like, but it seems so weird to me. It's like, look, like Spotlight is fantastic and we love it. And I'm glad it's there, but I shouldn't have to use a search thing to find like the settings
yeah.
pane that I want for something. Like, to me, that's just a sign of bad design.
Oh, the other side note, I know we're over time already and you guys haven't done your gratitude yet, but do you guys use full keyboard access?
Yes.
So in keyboard settings, you can turn on full keyboard access, which means that when a dialog pops up, you can hit tab to switch between the buttons and then space bar to hit a button. And I had it enabled in system preferences, but it wasn't working. And like, it would, on some apps it would work and some apps it wouldn't. And I couldn't figure out why. But then I discovered that in keyboard settings, there is a shortcuts pane where you can assign keyboard shortcuts for apps and function keys and everything. In the keyboard pane of the keyboard settings, there's an option called turn keyboard access on or off. There was another one that was like, change the way tab moves focus. And you can assign that to a keyboard shortcut. And I hit the keyboard shortcut that was assigned to it, and all of a sudden everything started working again. It seems to function independently of the full keyboard access setting.
Huh.
Just in case anyone else is running into that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
That is interesting. And that is okay.
We're getting into the weeds, everybody. Who wants to stay in the weeds? I like it in the weeds.
You like it in the weeds. Do you have your gratitude ready?
I sure do. My gratitude. So I'm a member owner of a research and evaluation firm that is a collaborative based in Minneapolis. We do work all around the world, and there's about 9 of us. It's all social justice based work. Anyway, so I have just tried Grammarly for Business. We've always used Grammarly, like individuals in the organization have used it, but we've started to get kind of more critical of how we communicate with clients or how we do sort of public facing communication. I remember, who's the journalism critic at NYU who
Jay Rosen?
Yeah, I remember Jay Rosen, I think it was him, saying, in journalism, you should treat everything you do as an editorial product. So your email is an editorial product, like whatever, right? Now, that really impacted me as a journalist, having heard that, and changed me generally. And we're kind of like hitting that point in our work where we want to kind of treat it that way. I'm trying to talk people into treating it that way. So Grammarly for Business, like I've used Grammarly forever, but Grammarly for Business allows you to basically turn Grammarly into a like Scrivener level feature party. And it's just like, it's amazing. So you can create your own style guide that is just like, it'll just underline something because, like we've written things where there and there is wrong, right? It's like, it just happens, right? You put the wrong there and you're moving too fast, whatever. Like, it happens to a couple of our members. And so I made a style guide that's like, hey, if you're using the word there, ERE, or the word there, EIR, you're just going to see it underlined. It's like, hey, is this the right one? And then you're allowed to, it allows you to just kind of turn features on. There must be 100 features that are like, if you want to try to not use, if you want to use non-binary language, or if you want to like use your dates this way or whatever. And so anyway, it's been amazing. And I'm in the process of creating a style guide, which you can do in a CSV file and just upload. Their interface is a little clunky, but if anybody's out there and has the funds or the need in a small business, or which is what ours is, Grammarly for Business is amazing.
Nice.
Cool.
Anyway,
so in Grammarly for Business, do they not now upload all of your stuff to their cloud as for training stuff? Like, can you at least stop that?
They do, as far as I know, and I don't know if business. I haven't gotten so far because I'm on the 7-day trial. That's a big concern of mine. So I should have said that I only use it for certain types of things.
Right.
I use it for emails that aren't sensitive, and honestly, I use it to teach myself. Like, yeah. I'm constantly learning. It's like, it's wrong a bunch of the time. And there's certain kinds of writing that it's just totally inappropriate to go into Grammarly for. It's like working with a really stubborn copy editor where it's like, hey, we have a voice, right? Like, and we want to still preserve voice. Don't forget that. But that's really important to me. And I'm not sure of the answer yet. But I mean, I've gone so granular as like, we've had emails to clients that are just too informal, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we just want to have a record of just kind of formal, clean correspondence. And in case for any reason something goes wrong and they want to like audit the partnership, and they're like, wow, these guys have just been like writing us and being like, let me know, LMK, or like whatever. So anyway, if you want to be uptight, which I do in this case, Grammarly for Business.
Okay, I'm interested in that. Yeah, because my only concern with Grammarly, because I think it's a great product, but my big concern has always been like, okay, you upload everything that I write, and so like for business purposes, like we are absolutely not allowed to use it. I mean, I'm sure some people do, but it is on our blacklist because the security audits have come back and they've been like, no. Yeah. And I don't know if that was the personal version, the business thing or whatnot, and I'm sure that we're not the only organization, and Microsoft was like this too. I'm sure that those are not the only organizations that have those sorts of concerns. And I know that certainly a lot of places have those things in place for ChatGPT and even things like a Copilot, which can be turned off and by default on business doesn't send anything at all back to anything. But that's always like my only weird thing with Grammarly, because I find it useful, is like, oh, I can't use this for work because everything that you type in is used as their training set. And for, most of my work stuff, it would be completely fine. But there are some things that would be like, I don't want that used in some way.
That actually reminds me, like we do some pretty sensitive projects like on juvenile justice and stuff like that. And we have sort of a document security hierarchy where, you've defined like 5 levels of security. And it makes me think that the most sort of permissive model could be a thing like, with this, you can use Grammarly, right? Like with this, you absolutely cannot use Grammarly. So I'm going to add that to the definitions once I research the security itself. Maybe I'll just decide to bail, but I love it so far.
Good.
I have a quick update.
Yes.
You may remember in the past we've talked about RC default apps.
Yes.
Wait, what does that mean?
The system preference thing we were just talking about.
Oh shit. I drifted off in that.
Yeah, I get it.
I was standing in for the listeners like, oh man, this is good, but I don't know what's going on. Right.
It is called Swift Default Apps, the new version, and you can use third-party preference panes in system settings. They show up way at the bottom of that horrible sidebar in system settings. But once you install Swift Default Apps, which you can do with Brew, you get all the usual internet URI schemes, uniform type identifiers and applications, all configurable.
Nice. Now, is this the one that has not been updated since 2019?
Yes.
Okay.
But it still works.
Okay, well then that's all I needed to know, because I found that, because it was funny. We were both Googling for these things at the same time, And I found that, and I was like, oh, but this hasn't been updated since 2019. I wonder if this even works. So that is good to know that you can have also custom preference planes, because that I was not aware of. I thought that had gone the way of the dodo. So happy that is not the case.
I listened this time.
All right, Christina, what do you got?
All right, so mine is actually Moom.
Yeah, Moom,
honestly,
Moom,
we were
Moom,
talking
Moom.
about that, and I was like, actually, you know what? Moom is one of my favorites. I've used a number of these different things over the years. I've used Mosaic. I've used what was one of the other ones called?
Oh God,
like Rectangle or something.
Something. Always back to Moom.
Magnet. There was Magnet. Yeah.
Yep.
Moom rules the roost.
Yep, and yeah, Magnet, that's it. And so Rectangle, some of those things, and so I've used a lot of these things over the years, and Moom is definitely the best. So big fan of that. If you're somebody who wants kind of a tiling Windows manager experience on the Mac, that is my pick, especially one that's like pretty and like easy to deal with. I still feel like that should be like a first party feature. And I, not that I want many tricks to be Sherlocked, but because I still feel like Moom could be better, could be like made to be better than whatever they were to do built in. But you know,
how? Like, what more could you ask Moom to do? It's weird that we've never talked about this. Are we sure we haven't?
I don't think we have.
It's not on our master list.
So no, we've talked about window managers, or like tiling window things, but I don't think we've gotten into this. I don't think Moom could be any better. What I'm saying is, I think that Moom could still be more advanced than what
I see.
What Apple does. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I feel like there should be a basic thing. The same way that like the default Windows 11 experience is superseded by what is then done by PowerToys. And I assume there might have been some third-party attempts to do things on Windows. Nobody is as good as PowerToys. PowerToys is just the tits. But yeah, I feel like there'd be a place where like maybe Moom would potentially be like Sherlock, but it would go above and beyond whatever Apple would do.
Can I tell you my three favorite things about Moom?
Please.
First of all, keyboard shortcuts. So you can say you can draw, you get like a grid of your screen, and you can draw in that grid what like a window position, like maybe the left half of your screen, or maybe like the upper right corner of your screen, and then you can
divide
assign
it into thirds.
Sure, you can assign keyboard shortcuts. So whatever the current window is, you hit the keyboard shortcut and it goes to that position on the screen. And I have a bunch of those in muscle memory as I move between windows. Second thing, it adds so that when you hover over the green icon in the traffic lights, like where you close the window and maximize the window, when you're running Moom and you hover over that, it brings up a little shortcut panel, and it has like this, it looks like a touchscreen on it, and you can draw in, like you click it and then you can draw on your screen where you want the window to go. It's very cool. And what was the third thing?
That feature I now use more even than my keyboard shortcuts. Weirdly, I don't know.
Yeah, same, to be honest.
And window sets. What do they call them in Moom? But you can store, once you get a bunch of windows of specific apps in the positions you want them in, they're called snapshots. You can take a snapshot and it will remember those apps in those positions. So the next time all those apps are running, you can trigger that snapshot and everything will go back to where you want it. And I incorporate that into bunches. So it launches all the apps and then uses AppleScript to tell Moom to move all the windows.
The way I use that feature is if I'm working on like a project that requires, a bunch of windows and I've got them all organized. I take a snapshot like that morning of the workspace. And then throughout the day, once I sully it with other things that are open and whatever else, I do the keyboard shortcut for it. And it just resets to where it needed to be. And I can think clearly again.
Good pick, Christina. We had a lot to say about this.
Yeah. So yeah, Moom, very, very good stuff. It's both in the Mac App Store and without it. I know that we're going long. I don't buy Mac App Store versions of apps if I can buy a non-Mac App Store version. Where are you two with that? Because if anything,
Same.
I try to avoid the Mac App Store version if at all possible.
Yeah, I've transitioned to that. I mean, it was a couple years ago, but like that's totally how I how I am. And in fact, the last time I used a brew file to set up a computer, I was amazed because I used like MAS, which is like, and I was amazed at how few Mac Store apps I had. It looked wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Brett.
I wish setup was a little easier to interact with, like from the command line or whatever else.
Yeah.
But,
agreed.
anyway.
But I also understand that would be like difficult in a lot of regards. Like you could probably make it work. Yeah, it is an edge case because that's the thing. It's like there's a way you could make that work with Bruce, but it would be so much effort that I understand why that's not like
I wouldn't want him to prioritize it.
The only reason someone might prefer the Mac App Store is for updates. For just having one place where you can go to keep everything up to date. But that's what Mac Updater does.
Exactly.
And it does it better. And like Mac Updater could do like your audio plugins and everything. So no, I do not. If something is available off the App Store, I will buy it off the App Store. That said, like NV Ultra will be released on the App Store first, just because from a monetary perspective, the audience for the App Store is far more built in, and people like your average Mac user trust the Mac App Store more than they trust going to a website and putting in their credit card information.
See, that's what I was going to ask. Like, I was going to say, like, that's I guess what my question was. Like, is that still the case? Because I could have seen that argument a number of years ago, but like at this point, we've all talked about this over the years, but like, let's be honest, like the quality in the Mac App Store is pretty shit. And it's full of a lot of like,
it's gotten bad. Yeah.
It's like full of like my first app shit or stuff that hasn't been updated in years. And then some really good things where the developers have to go around their ass to get to their elbow to make sure that it works correctly because of some of the API restrictions and other things.
And like when it used to be, they would do these like featured on the App Store content.
Yep.
And they would highlight like an app I'd never heard of, and it would be a good find. These days they seem to have like these mainstays, and they highlight their own products all the time. I can't remember the last time like something like Marked got highlighted by the App Store.
Yeah.
Maybe they're still reaching out to indie developers, but it seems less so now.
It seems less so. And I also, those are those things where like, you don't know, like, I wonder how much that even does in terms of bringing people into it. Like right now, there's 5 ways to customize Word, and it's, tricks about that. And I don't know who cares about that.
Last time Mark got featured on the App Store, it resulted in about $500 over my usual monthly sales, which is for an indie app like Mark, that's a non-trivial amount of money.
100%.
It does bring in new users, but in general, like the App Store is not. I have no growth on the App Store.
Right.
It's impossible to find stuff.
Right. Which I guess that was sort of my thing is like, it's not that it's non-trivial. I just kind of wonder like at this point. And I know that there have been a number of developers who've had to leave the Mac App Store for various reasons because being there has been too much of a problem. Like having to do the work of managing both versions. Sandboxing. Yeah. And well, it's not even so much sandboxing as the App Store way of sandboxing because you can still have a sandboxed and like secured app. But then what the App Store wants you to do goes like another level beyond that. So things like Kaleidoscope don't work.
Right.
And things like that. But like, at this point, I understand, I guess, people doing it, but I wonder how much even modern Mac, like newbie, like Mac users, I guess there's like, obviously with iOS, it makes sense. That's the only place you can go and the App Store is good. But I wonder,
it's
I wonder how much
in,
people,
so.
Right. But I wonder like how much people, on like the normies are really actually even going to the App Store.
I don't know. Setup is my largest source of monthly income now.
Is it interesting? Yeah.
Huh. Which, I mean, like the sales of Marked have declined over time. And the only reason Setup is the largest now. Setup hasn't grown for a couple years. My income from it hasn't. but it stayed steady.
It stayed steady.
And it's monthly recurring income, and that's worthwhile. Kaleidoscope went subscription.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be going subscription with the next version.
Yeah.
After I bought my expensive license.
Yeah, and the subscription is not going to be cheap. And I talked to Florian about it. And they put a lot of thought into it, and I kind of get it, because
I totally get it.
Mark has thousands of users that I make about $1,000 a month on it. Even though like there's a small army of dedicated users that if I went subscription, I could be making a lot more money, and I would have a lot more impetus to continue developing it. And I'm starting to really see the wisdom of the subscription, what do you call it? Method.
Yeah. It's one of those things where like I instinctively as like a user am annoyed with like the subscription for everything model.
Sure.
I get it. But I also have to like understand, well, as an ongoing business concern, if you want to continue updating things, and like Kaleidoscope and for instance, because I know we both talked to them, but it's one of those things where this is an application that was always expensive, that they took over, that it had 3 or 4 previous owners, had not been well maintained in years and years.
And they fixed it and made a ton of cool improvements, like really useful stuff.
But also like did, the thing where they were unbelievably, I think, like good to the former owner, like, to people who had licenses before. Like they were really good with support and other stuff, but they took this thing that had basically been dead and had to do a rewrite. Like I think in a lot of ways it might have been easier if you would just started from scratch and said, let's create a diff app that has similar features, than trying to do what they did. And so it's a ton of work. It's an ongoing, price concern. They had the Mac App Store stuff. The only thing I helped them with, because they like let me know that it was happening, I helped them a little bit with the edit of their blog post.
Yeah, I did too. they sent it out to all the Mac writers.
Yeah.
That does bring up one way that the App Store is handy, though, is subscriptions.
Yeah.
I used to be very much. I used to hate the subscription for everything idea, and it felt like I was just constantly signing up for more and more subscriptions. But I've gotten used to it. Like I get receipts every month. I can keep track of my expenses. I know how to cancel a subscription. Most places give you a warning before if it's a yearly subscription, they'll let you know in advance before that $99 chunk comes out of your account. The App Store makes it easy to see all of my App Store based subscriptions in one place, and I can just literally go down a list and cancel or renew all in one place, rather than having to track down individual subscriptions that I bought outside of the App Store. So that is a benefit to subscribing to apps through the App Store.
Yeah. That's for sure. And that's honestly what Apple is pushing on people. Like they want everybody to go subscription. Like particularly, I'm going to be honest, I don't think Apple cares that much about the Mac App Store, but it's particularly one of those things that they are trying to push everybody towards on iOS is, first it went in-app purchase, and now it's like they want everything to be subscription. Because like, let's be honest, that's where Apple gets their money, which is fine.
Like, we Fletcher and I both, at the time we started talking about how we were going to price NV Ultra, both of us kind of we didn't love the idea of a subscription, but the more we talked about it, the more it just made sense as a model. That's the word I was looking for, a model, subscription model. And it's actually like there are a lot of benefits to it, partly because it's so compatible with the App Store, and it's the only way on the App Store you can offer a free trial is if you have subscriptions and in-app purchases. But I'm on board. I've really come around on the subscription thing.
Yeah, I've come around on it in the sense that like for apps that I care about and that I want to do, where I get annoyed is if it's an app that I don't even know. I'm going to use this twice a year.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to. I don't want to
sign up for the 1 month subscription and then try to remember to cancel.
Exactly, or try to find another alternative or whatnot. Right. Like that's where I think it's hard for subscriptions to work. Like I think that if it's going to be something that you use ongoingly, I think it makes on an ongoing concern. I think it makes sense, and I don't have a problem with it. Where it's more, I think, problematic and maybe not, at least the way subscriptions work now, aren't well designed for it, is if it is like a one-off utility. Like I only use this a handful of times.
Wouldn't it be cool if there was like a pay as you go, like you want to launch the app and you just pay 99 cents to launch it because you're never going to launch it again, or like not for another 6 months. I definitely have apps like that I'm like, I might not use this again for a year. And if I subscribe now, I will forget to cancel that subscription. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yep. All right.
Yeah. Let's do it. This is a long one. It was a fun one. I gotta get out of here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Get some sleep, you very good people.
Get some sleep.
Get some sleep.
The system is going down now.